Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest.
We will be meeting in today's masterclass Mr. Manish Kumar. Manish ji is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the National Skill Development Corporation. During your 4 years tenure at NSDC, Manish ji, you were particularly focused on improving the quality of private sector, delivery of skills across priority sectors and making skills aspirational. Prior to joining NSDC, you worked for the World Bank as the country coordinator and senior institution development economist for water and sanitation program in Delhi. You worked for the World Bank in the Middle East and North African countries covering Lebanon, Iraq, and more. You've served in the Indian Administrative Service, occupying various positions in the government of Tripura up to 2011, and you were selected as the Mason Fellow by Harvard University in 2003 for your leadership. You hold a degree in Bachelor's of Technology in Mining Machinery from IIT ISM, Dhanbad, a Master's in Public Administration from Harvard University, and a PhD in Public Policy from the George Washington University. From the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So as I think we spoke about, Manish, today's intent to speak together with you is to know you as a leader. I'm so amazed and I'm rather overwhelmed that I'm talking to a leader who's not just at the helm of public policy and the decision making in the government in India, but you're highly educated. I mean, a normal layman Indian citizen would believe that the government, you don't really expect one, a very high international exposure, and two, that caliber. So my very first question, Manish ji, to you would be to please take us through your journey as you started as a young boy of 18, 19 years old. Did you see yourself coming to this level and standing where you are today?
Thank you, Deepsika. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you. Speaking about when I started around 18, 19, and whether I'm where exactly where I wanted to be, I think I didn't start with a prefixed mind that I'm going to be so and so. I think I was more interested in doing something which is meaningful. So I think what's important, what was important to me then and continues to be important is, do I get a meaning to my life from the work that I do? So that's how I looked at life then, and that's how I look at life today. And I think that's how I look at it in future too. As 18, 19, I think I remember I was a student leader early on. And I was student leader for a very interesting reason. I was not really interested in student politics, but there were two warring factions and they had intense rivalry, and they found me to be the candidate which both sides trusted. So therefore, that I think was the first experience which I had on leadership, essentially about persuading so that people don't really get into fights, but also creating trust that they therefore decide you take the responsibility, and I took it. And there was no election that year for the post of General Secretary. I was unanimous candidate. So I think I had that first experience of leadership at that point in a very concrete terms. And the next 1 year, I was the General Secretary of the Students' Union. The interesting thing is, I think that shaped many of my thoughts because I realized that in serving others, I would derive a lot of personal satisfaction. That had always been there, but I think this was the time when I could feel it more. And therefore, I think in the long run, when I decided I'm going to switch to civil service, I think that was the motivation, and that was like the spark which made me feel that this is what I will really enjoy. And therefore, I happened to give civil service. I was a good student generally, so on the very first chance I got through, and I ended up in Tripura. Now, Tripura is one of the most difficult states in 1990s, the early 1990s. And within Tripura, the most difficult place was where I got posted. Usually, people run away from there. And I decided to dig my heels and stay. So the issue out there was of insurgency, high level of insurgency. And it was so bad that there would not be much traffic on that road, perhaps just one bus which would travel. with police escort both on the front and the back. And the police would not come out of the police station. It was really that dangerous. So my job was to put it in order and win the people's trust and actually get back to normalcy. And I initially, obviously, I was taken aback because I was not really expecting that difficult a situation. I thought life will be cooler, but I actually decided to dig my heels there, and the way I think I provided leadership was more by example, and also by very open communication and being very authentic. So you have to be fair and authentic. I think that's very critical. People will have differing views, and societies have problems. I treated violence as a kind of communication, and people are upset about something, and therefore violence is like somebody is not listening. Perhaps that's why they're getting violent. So can we listen? And then obviously there's the issue of law and order, and you have to maintain that too. So you have to be tough for that. So it's a combination of both of it. And eventually, in about 1.5 years, when I left that place, you could actually move around that place. I mean, it had become peaceful. And today, if you go to that place, I mean, you don't have any security fears, nothing. Of course, there are lots of other things which go into changing any place. But I think creating that initial confidence is quite important. And that two years which I spent there too, I think shaped me in many ways. And I continued in that journey eventually, working in some remote parts of Tripura. My focus was actually on women empowerment in Tripura, quite heavily towards the second half of my career out there. And I think it was that which got me attention from the Kennedy School in US, and I ended up getting the Masson Fellow admission in the Harvard University. I went on to study. So I think, broadly speaking, it's been a combination of that inner drive. I think my approach, which has been about communicating very openly, being very receptive to ideas, not getting too emotional or fearful about things. I think you have to use your emotion positively. So it's not that the emotions don't come to you, but you have to use it in a constructive way rather than let it destroy you by making you very angry. So even anger can actually be managed in such a way that you win people by the authenticity of your anger than by getting completely lost in your anger, which is seen as somebody who just lost himself. So I think managing yourself in a way that exudes or creates confidence in others, I think that has been quite important. And I think finally, as I said, you must enjoy what you are doing. You must feel deeply from within that this is something which you love, and you would be happy to be doing that. You would enjoy doing it till your last day. So I think that feeling is quite important, and I think I had it all along. And public service, in that sense, really was very dear and close to me, to my heart, and continues to remain so.
So, Dr. Kumar, one specific question. I mean, a lot of when we talk about, especially in the recent past, there's been so much conversation about bureaucracy and the government, and then the entire functioning is dependent on bureaucracy and how bureaucracy moves, because that's where execution happens. And visioning is one thing, but agar execution nahi hai, to vision kuch nahi kar sakta. So, what do you think? And I meet so many leaders in similar capacity, especially in the civil services side, and a lot of them feel very claustrophobic, especially somebody coming of pedigree like yours. There are a lot of these bureaucrats who feel extremely claustrophobic in the sense that they come with to do good, to be over communicate, to communicate and be transparent and all that. But at some level, neither system allows it nor people expect it. So how did you balance that through your journey? So if there are more bureaucrats coming in, or the younger lot, the next cadre coming in, what would you tell them to do to live through the system and excel?
Yeah, so I actually did not live through the system, by the way. So, but I have a view on this. It's very correct that there is actually quite a lot of extremely good people in civil service, in bureaucracy, and I've got plenty of friends who are, I mean, among the best that I've seen in the world, and I've seen quite a bit, and I can say that they're really good, both intellectually and as human beings. But I think the institutional constraint comes in, and the institutional constraints are for several reasons, I think, and it requires addressing by not just by bureaucrats but also by politicians. The first thing is that if you look at India as a country, we are both a country and a continent. We are 1.4 billion people, which is 40 countries in Africa. They add up to 1.4 billion. So we are huge. And then we are, unlike other countries, for example, US, you have one language, right? I mean, one language or two at the most, Spanish and English, and it's mostly English which drives US. And therefore, when you want to standardize that kind of a country, it's easy. To organize any society, you require what you technically call the common cognitive belief system, essentially implying that when I use a word, and when you interpret that, you get exactly the same meaning which I'm trying to explain to you. So this is something which is extremely tough in India, and I've seen at times that Government of India has issued an order in English in Delhi, and by the time it reaches Tripura, in the lowest guy out there in the land revenue system, he is actually interpreting exactly the reverse, because it has gone into so many layers through which it has gone, and that's his meaning out of it. So I think one of the challenge, I'll give you an interesting anecdote. I remember one person being suspended because he told his boss that your advice was invaluable. Now, that's supposed to be definitely a very plus thing, right? I mean, you're basically praising him. But the boss was extremely upset, and he said, invaluable, you're saying that I'm useless? And because before valuable, he put in. Therefore, he couldn't, and in his cognitive system, belief system, it was a negative word. And he wrote it in the file, and he actually suspended him. And later when we were reviewing, we were surprised. I mean, he was praising you all this while, you couldn't get it. So I think creating this common belief system is a very, very tough thing in India. And I think that's one of the reasons why people flounder. Institutions were meant for stability of India by the Britishers. It is not meant for growth, the institutions. And I think we have not been able to change our institution very fast. I have studied the range of institutions. So at one end is Mexico, at the other end is India, by the way. So India, you get people from bureaucracy who are highly intelligent, come to a system and follow rules and regulation, and therefore start the journey in a very, very positive way. Mexico, the other end, which I learned during my studies, is basically a spoil system that I come as a minister and I bring everybody who is my friend, my uncle, everybody into the ministry, and that's perfectly okay in the system at that particular point of time. And then what happens is in India, when you want to change rules, it is far much more difficult than if you wanted to change a rule in Mexico, because Mexico, everybody has the same goal and they belong to one unit, right? And therefore they quickly change it. If the top man says, let's change this, everybody falls in line. In India, that doesn't happen. And I think that's one of the other extreme where perhaps there'll be a resistance to change because the system is used to working in a particular way. I think it's the middle ground. Some of the countries like New Zealand, Australia, USA, etc., represent the middle ground where there is a flexibility also, and there is a certain level of rigidity also. I think that's where we need to go in long term, institutionally. But I don't think so we have been able to move that needle, because I think the challenge in a country like India, as I said, is that is you are struggling with so many things. So you're trying to fix an aeroplane while it's flying, right? I mean, you can't say that let's stop the aeroplane and then we fix it and it'll fly from here onwards. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge. That is a moving machine. Nobody has figured out how do you keep on changing it incrementally that eventually it becomes more efficient. But I think overall the directions lately has been on the positive side. I mean, over last several years now, and I get a feeling that we will be lots of rules that you will notice are long term. I'll give you a few examples. The GST is something which is long term. I mean, there might be difficulties which people face today, but it has huge long term impact. Aadhaar was one of such things. National education policy is again very positive. The way it is crafted. So a lot of things which have been coming lately has been on the positive side and will have long-term positive consequences. So far as I'm concerned, I lived within the institution. I enjoyed it, but I believe in service not as a noun but as a verb. So to me, the action is more important. And I actually honestly believe that everybody does public service if they want to. You're doing one by being a good communicator, by ensuring that the people get messages that they need to get, right? So therefore, even that's a huge public service, which we cannot underplay. And I think everybody can be very powerful public service player, but people often take ego position, and then if I get lost that, oh, I just want to be in this position, the verb is not important, the noun is important, then there's a problem. And I think that's where some of our malaise lies. So personally, I believe that we should be far much more mobile. Bureaucracy, I think, is brilliant, but I think there is a need for bureaucracy to be moving out. The reason why they need to move out is you must push yourself out of your comfort zone if you really want to learn. And when I have been in that comfort zone, so I know, it really looks fabulous, but I pushed myself out because I knew that if I'm going to be here, I'll never learn. So you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone, go out, learn. And I think it should be made institutional that everybody after 10 years of service is forced to go out for 5 years, 7 years, go and work in private sector, go and work in NGO, go and work any damn place you like, and then come back if you are still wanting to come back and serve the country again. And this whole idea of lateral move, where people are coming laterally into service, is a good idea, I think, and it brings fresh perspective. Obviously the bureaucracy will be a strong challenge because they're very capable, very capable. They can actually put up a tough fight to anybody who comes from outside. But then it does bring a new perspective, and it's quite important to have that. So broadly, my thoughts on this issue.
Lovely, both positively, and I was actually wanting to stop you there and say that, acha, ab personally kya kare? So institutionally, but I think you alluded to that, so that was wonderful. Now my next question, which kind of talks about your journey again, from Tripura to X to Y to now to NSDC. How do you learn so quickly? What is your mantra of, changing? Because your job is not easy, right? I mean, you're sitting right at the top. You have to take some very, very tough decisions, which need to be based on both facts as well as experience. How do leaders like yourselves take such quick decisions and with limited set of facts? What do you do to build that knowledge?
So I think a few things which I do. One is you learn from experience. Obviously, you talk to a lot of people. You need to be communicating to all your stakeholders. You have to be very conscious that there are people who will oppose your views, and it's very important for that people actually oppose your views. So in my office, I actually tell people quite openly that if you don't really reply me back sometimes, then I would actually think you're not really adding value to me, because it's important for you to differ. You can't just think like me, because there was the point hiring you if you think exactly like me. So I would have thought exactly that way. So I think one is how do you ensure that multiple viewpoints come in, people differ with you, you are flexible enough that somebody tells you something logically, and you don't take it as an ego position that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm your boss, therefore I must be right all the time. You should be able to change, and you should not be afraid of saying that there was a need that I should have reflected on this particular issue. So I think one is learning from people themselves around you, and which means people above you, people below you, people who differ with you, people who think similar to you. That dialogue is very important. Second, I think my best friends are my books. So I spend a lot of time in reading, regardless of how busy I am. Actually, I spend time on books. I read quite a bit, and I read very diverse. And that's been how I was, I think, from the beginning, that I simply love ideas, and I engage in them, I read them, and I think I forget, but many times I realize that, well, I actually end up keeping many of it subconsciously, and it comes to use, at some point of time, and I suddenly recall, okay, this is the kind of framework which was there. So I think this is one, and I think the third way, which I would say I learned, is time to time, I actually take breaks to learn. So, for example, when I was in civil service for almost 12 years, I was very seriously concerned that my ability to grasp was going down. My attention span was decreasing. And I could see a lot of changes in me, which I was not happy about. So therefore, I took a break, went for studies and spent 1 year, studying, etc. And then I enjoyed it. So therefore, I continued both working as well as doing my PhD thereafter, and that got me deeper. One thing which one has to be cautious about is, that as you study, not to get too proud about knowledge, because more you study, you realize how ignorant you are. In fact, you are most confident when you have only half the knowledge. Then you're extremely confident because you just don't know that there is something which is beyond it. So, so I think one of the challenge for anybody is to remember that, you see, this world is far too big and far too complex for anybody to be having all the knowledge in his head, and therefore not being too proud about knowledge, being humble about it, but always striving to get as much as possible into you, and respecting everybody, regardless of how much education they might have taken or not taken. I have actually learned quite a bit now from people who are relatively not formally educated. When I was in Tripura and all these places, I interacted hugely with people who had never been to formal schools, but the kind of intellect they had, the kind of experience they had, they teach you. I mean, and then you have to be open for that. So I think that's how I learn. I think I keep myself open. I also push myself out of my comfort zone frequently. I take my breaks when I have to, when I feel that I must sit down and now, spend a year where I recalibrate my thought processes. And then when I'm back, I give myself fully to whatever job I might have taken. So I remember in the World Bank, I worked very heavily on sanitation, which is pre-Swachh Bharat. So a lot of background work that would have helped actually execute policies was there already in the World Bank because of a lot of hard work done by some of us, which includes me, but there are lots of other colleagues too. And thereafter, I think now I'm in skills, and I have enjoyed my time. I think learned a little bit, and So next I'm going to be doing definitely things which interest me, and which essentially would imply things that benefit people at large at scale.
That's wonderful. So I will come to the skills part as well as one of my very last questions, but I have one more question as a leader that I wanted to talk to you about. So, Dr. Kumar, like I said, I've seen and we see, administrative officers or leaders from the government system or the public policy system. But there is one big differentiator that I've seen in you, which is, one is, if I can use, massively credible image, and two is huge amount of trust that you've generated. And it's not just the skilling part that I'm talking about. The people who work with you, the people who are probably looking forward to working with you, the entire ecosystem is extremely positive about you. How do you make sure, or what has your conscious contribution been? I'm sure a lot of it is subconscious and just by virtue of who you are. But what has been your conscious contribution to make or give that comfort to people who are around you?
I think it's important to be fair, and you could be wrong. I mean, I can be wrong. Honestly, it's not that every decision I take is right, but I think every decision that I take is done with fairness. That is there very deeply. And anybody comes and challenges me, I'll always have arguments on why I consider it fair. And usually the person goes satisfied that, yeah, this looks very fair to have been done that way. So I think fairness is a very, very important part of any leadership that you take up. I think that is one important part. Secondly, I think probably the need for communicating, and the need for communicating in a way that it provides a view of the future, provides a view of where you are heading. What is that meaning that is coming out of your life? So let's say I'm spending my time doing skilling. Now, I actually told some of my staff in a written email once that for every 1 hour that they worked, they made a difference in the life of 7 people in India. So therefore, essentially, I was telling them that please don't waste your time, because every 1 hour you waste, there are 7 people whose lives may not change because you didn't work hard enough. Essentially, how do you communicate, and how do you create that meaning, which ensures that the person sees it as something very personal, something which motivates him because it's creating meaning to his life. I think that's important, how you communicate, and the moment when you communicate. Sometimes I think communication, particularly written communication in India, can be quite difficult. It's not so direct, and people can often write a very lengthy email, which means very little. So I think working on your communication, that it ensures is very precise, it is personal, it is non-technical when not required, and technical when it is required. I think those are the communication part has to be taken very seriously, I would say. So these 2 things, being fair and communicating rightly, these 2 I think are critical.
Great, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would want to add as a leader? What would be the final, say, maybe 3 messages that you would want to give to an aspiring leader, both from a corporate and public policy perspective, that they could do and takeaways from your life?
So, I mean, personally, I would say that never confuse a manager and a leader. These are 2 different things. A leader doesn't require any power behind him. He simply believes in what he is doing. And therefore, he will do regardless of whether he has power or doesn't have power. It doesn't matter to him, because he believes in that. So I think, how driven are you? That's, I think, the very important part. A lot of people actually wait for power, and they think that, okay, when you get power, then you're a leader. There's no relationship between power and leader. You can have a lot of power and be just a manager. You're just ticking off boxes and not really providing leadership. So I think this differentiation, understanding this differentiation, and checking within yourself that are you having that drive or not. Let's say that you don't have it, then I think it's very important that you look for meaning in your life. That what is it which really makes you crazy about, right? I mean, is there something that makes you feel very strongly about contributing, and make that your passion? I mean, that's what you should be doing, because then the leadership automatically comes. You would automatically get involved in those issues. I think that's the second part. And third is, I think, when you interact with people, win the trust of people. And win the trust of people doesn't mean that you have to always agree. I think they need to see you as somebody who cares, who is empathetic, regardless of he being your friend or not being your friend, regardless of he having a view which is completely opposite. But you are empathetic because your difference is not one of person, it is one of views, and it's the path that you are taking, which you have a strong logic for, and perhaps he or she might have a different one. So I think these 2-3 things make a huge difference.
Excellent. I've never thought about it like that. A manager and a leader are 2 different things, and how often do we confuse it? Almost always.
Always. So yeah.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Kumar, that takes me to my last section on your current role. The NEP has just come out, and you manage, if I'm not wrong, 37 different sectors are under NSDC.
Yes. Yeah.
What is your vision for moving, and as we see, of course, from the college, the school education to the higher education to now the corporate world, etc., and the entire gamut is now moving to the online learning format. What is your vision and view of the speed of execution and the level of maturity that you see across these 37 sectors, and which would be the sectors, according to you, would be the most promising in terms of adoption of e-learning?
Yeah, so I think, when I answered this question, for reasons that I said before, that India is both a country and a continent, I like to decompose India. And what I find is I usually do it using income quartiles. So if you look at, India, the lowest income quartile, the lowest 25% of India, they have an income of 26,000 rupee per month or less. The next income quartile, that's between 25 and 50, they have between 26,000 to 37,000 per month. That's what they earn. The next income quartile earns between 37,000 to 57,000. That's the 25% to 75% of India. And anybody who earns more than 57,000 is actually the top 25% of India's income quartile. So that's what India is. Anybody who earns more than 88,000 rupees per month actually is the top 10% of India's income decile. So I think when you look at the problem from this perspective, suddenly you find that when digital comes, whom is it going to really benefit unless we are conscious that there are people who perhaps need it the most but will never get it. So therefore you have to create space for that. So digital, therefore, it's good to talk about AI, good to talk about IoT, etc. But as I mentioned, there's the top 10%, right? 88,000 per month and above. These are the people who actually will benefit from AI, from IoT and others as subjects which they learn and get jobs. And there'll be plenty of people who will do that and get jobs. I think our real challenge would be that can we take this digital revolution down below? Is it possible for us to take it to the lowest income quartile? And it's possible in reality. So I think a few of the things which we have done, is if you go to eSkill India platform, a lot of digital skilling that we do is not done in just one language, not just English. It's actually done in 9 different languages. So even if somebody is, let's say, in the lowest 25% of India's income, and is not, let's say, not had chance to actually go to English school and learn English, and therefore, the difficulty of not being able to access regular academic stuff, the eSkill India platform actually provides you that opportunity. You could listen in your local language, learn in your local language, And I think we want to create more and more of such digital potential where it's hitting right at the bottom. Secondly, I think few things which will happen, and I'm actually quite impressed at the speed at which it's happening, is even some of the very traditional roles, for example, carpentry, which you normally would associate, with somebody taking a saw and cutting. I have seen young boys from remote areas of Rajasthan working in institutions set up by Nursi. He's a famous, basically a woodwork person. And in the outskirts of Mumbai, it's a big factory. And what they essentially have is they're traditional carpenters, young boys who have been trained. They're not very educated, but they have been trained. They have been trained on what? On how to manage computers that are linked to robots, which actually do the real cutting. So lots of let's say wood actually being lifted, being given shape through automatic machines. But the computer entry is being done by these boys who are not highly educated. I mean, they might not even know much of English, but they're able to operate that computer, which I can't, honestly. And therefore, it's actually changing, the way the world, is operating. Secondly, I've seen, for example, we talk of driverless cars in California. Now, these driverless cars, as I often mention, are often driven by data, which is given by, which is provided by girls from Bhubaneswar and 24 Parganas in West Bengal, who are trained by some of our partners. And essentially, the fact that they were trained from rural parts of Odisha, brought to Bhubaneswar, and provided jobs. Young children, with just maybe class 10, 12 pass, and earning good money through that. So it's the power of the digital technology which is enabling that. And all that they're doing is sitting in front of a computer, looking at some picture of some street from California, which comes into the screen, and they tag on that. They have been taught how to tag. There's the median of the road. There's a lamppost on the left. There's the curve of the road. They just keep on tagging that for 10 minutes and then push that up to, if there's a 35 miles per hour, they will write that. And then they send it up to the cloud. It goes up and then another picture comes. And the 100 girls who are sitting and doing that day and night. And they are very happy with the money that they get doing this kind of work. Now, essentially, some car then drives in California. They're picking up this kind of data, converting that into machine intelligence. So the intelligence of a girl from the lowest income quartile from Bhubaneswar or outskirts of Bhubaneswar is actually helping move cars in California. So I think we need those kind of jobs which are interlinked to India's prosperity from the bottom. in addition to, of course, the IoT and AI and virtual reality and augmented reality, which we all speak of and we understand they are important. And on the top side, what I've found is recent interest in Japan, huge interest, that they want AI, artificial intelligence experts from India to be working in Japan. You see, aging population, they have to depend quite a bit on robotics. So therefore, how do we ensure that there is a flow that can be enabled? So we have got some 30 different organizations, support organizations, through which we are now planning. And we had a webinar on 6th of August this year, where the Japanese participated and they explained their interest in taking AI experts from India. Japanese language, we noticed, can be learned by Indians in about 6 to 9 months. If you are from Tamil Nadu, you pick it up very fast. This surprised us. So you pick it up fast because apparently the structure of Tamil language and the structure of Japanese language are very similar. So therefore, it comes very naturally. And people, I've seen Tamil children speaking Japanese in Japan, and they were so fluent that the Japanese clapped. They were so happy about it. So I think we are talented. In any case, we speak multiple languages. I think we are willing to learn as a population, and generally, I think Indians are well regarded for their behavior. We have some natural soft skills, and some others need to be built. We work on that. So I think overall, it's been, very enjoyable on this front.
So one leading question, the for example, the sectoral bit that you were talking about and the distribution that you spoke about. So what would be the primary use cases, Dr. Kumar, that you see in these in India emerging? I mean, where do you think the online learning part will become most relevant? You talked of carpentry, you talked about data management. बट आपके हिसाब से मतलब कौन से 3 एरियाज ऐसे रहेंगे जहां पे आपको लगता है कि यूज केसेस ऑनलाइन लर्निंग के बहुत ज्यादा बिल्ड होने वाले हैं? इज इट इन टर्म्स ऑफ सर्विस ओरिएंटेशन, इट कुड बी सेल्स, इट कुड बी आई डोंट नो, टेक्निकल स्किल्स, what is your sense?
So I think we perhaps don't know enough, honestly. So like I will tell you how things seem to be evolving at the moment and how fast it is evolving. Sometimes people are not able to keep track of that. One of our partners was telling me that a lot of things that we do in our web browser would actually be going into sound system, right? I mean, we'll basically be asking the browser to open rather than opening the browser. Already we are talking to Alexa, many of us. So I think the future is getting towards voice data and using that voice data. Now in that, there are 2-3 languages which apparently will be extremely popular and where perhaps the growth will be very fast. So they say that the highest obviously is English. That's where a lot of data, voice data will be used. But second is Hindi, and the third is Tamil again. So therefore, there are languages which is going to benefit hugely. Now, when we, I think, get into the language part of how we operate internet and the digital world, then I think things will change drastically. So you would have seen a lot of change coming from mobile. I think the next phenomenal change will come because you are able to talk in your local language, right? I mean, and the computer is responding and talking to you back in local language. And I think those are, what will be the defining things of the future. As of now, I mean, we are all aware that, the data science, data analytics, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics, these are very important topics, and these are the ones which are trending. These are, again, as I said, for the perhaps the 88,000 rupee per month and above category who are going to benefit most out of it. But I think when the language part comes, and which is occurring quite fast, then I think a large number of people will benefit in a very big way. So we have to be watching, and I think one of the things that NSDC does is we are constantly watching the market and trying to then, through our sector skill councils, draw in that information, create job roles, encourage training partners that can you please begin working on this. And we are aware that some of them are already on it and working on it. So therefore, this knowledge itself becomes important.
Absolutely, and it is evolving. So you think that, from a to put it all together in terms of, the vernacular part would bring even the lowest 25% up into the mainstream and perhaps make them more employable.
Yes, yeah. Yes, and
Okay.
I think increase the chances of employability as well as enhance their skills in a way. Yeah.
Fantastic. Perfect. That's roughly about what I had, Manishji, today for the conversation. But it was enjoyable. It was thoroughly enjoyable, and I got to know you better as a person, and that was my biggest takeaway from today's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I think one aspect of skill which perhaps I keep emphasizing is the fact that skill is a case of market failure. The private sector doesn't skill people, and it doesn't do globally. In general, I'm not saying they don't skill, but I mean in general they have there is aversion to skill because particularly if you're MSME, because you know that your competitor is going to poach that guy if you have invested a lot of money on them, on that person. So private sector therefore tries to reduce that risk, and that's the reason why globally government actually comes in to invest money into skilling. However, at some point when the economy grows, you will find that the private returns become quite high. So you would have noticed that in the IT world, in the turn of the century when IT was growing very rapidly, then almost all the big companies that we had, they had created their own training centers. And therefore, there is a time when the private sector also begins to take interest. So it's a question of, I think, finding out which sector is growing how, and then ensuring that there is a combination of flow of both private and the government money into skilling. And so I think keeping that in mind is important.
I actually want to ask one last question after the bye, which is what I forgot. What does the future hold for Dr. Kumar? You already studied so much, you read so much, you are beyond the top 0.5% in terms of the education levels that you've garnered already. What is the future? What is the next 5 years for Dr. Kumar?
So for me, I think after I end my tenure, I'll have to take 1 year to unlearn. So that's equally important, right? So I think you need to, I think, refresh yourself, reboot yourself, and I'm going to take time to reboot myself, which would be more getting into a little bit of academics for a while, maybe just putting my thoughts together to write a book, because I think it's important to write a book which is in a way, because skill is going to be important for a long time. So if you write a book that's futuristic, which gives the thought of today, but shows where we should be heading in general, or how we are heading and what are the challenges, I think that'll be beneficial to people. So probably I'll spend a year doing that, and then I'll see what to do next.
Wonderful. This is a lovely conversation, Manish. It's such an honor to have spoken to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deepsika. Thank you so much.